Good afternoon to you. 306 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. Coming up this hour, we talk to Steve Baker. He's an investigative reporter for The Blaze. He covered the events of January 6th in person, and now the Biden Justice Department is telling him he needs to report tomorrow to be placed under arrest. They have not told him what they are charging him with. The latest on that story coming up as Steve joins us this hour. Sean Davis is here at 4:30. The co-founder of The Federalist will give us a sense of what's going on with Senate leadership. Mitch McConnell announced that he's stepping down. He gave us 8 months' notice this week. And an establishment Republican has already thrown his hat in the ring. Sean Davis will react to that. Jason Sneed is here at 5 o'clock with the Honest Elections Project as the Biden administration starts cutting checks to poll workers around the country, to voter registration workers. Oh, that's fine. That's fine. It's not like they have a huge history of rigging elections or anything. You can join us, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL, rigging elections. You see what happened with that Illinois judge yesterday? The judge in Illinois decided that Donald Trump can't be on the ballot. So they're removing Trump from the ballot in Illinois. Well, guess which county that came from? Do you want to take a wild guess? If you said Cook County, Illinois, you'd be totally correct. It was Cook County, Illinois, where a judge has made a decision that Trump shall not be on the ballot. And in fact, the language of the declaration of the ruling is so insane. Listen to this. The Illinois State Board of Elections shall remove Donald J. Trump from the ballot for the general primary election on March 19th, 2024, or cause any votes cast for him to be suppressed according to the procedures within their administrative authority. So the judge, this crazy Democrat judge in Cook County, Illinois, says remove Donald J. Trump from the ballot or cause any votes that are cast for him to be suppressed. In other words, if you go into the ballot box and you write in the name Donald J. Trump, your vote will literally be, quote, suppressed. The left is constantly warning us that we would be suppressing votes by forcing people to show an ID to demonstrate that they are who they say they are. Here you have a lefty judge explicitly saying suppress voters if they vote for Trump. Does this get any more brazen? How is it even possible to get more brazen than this? So they're rigging ballots in Illinois. And that, of course, led me, as I was looking at this story, I was thinking, you know, boy, if there's any place in America that has a long history of election rigging, it's Chicago. It's Illinois. Chicago's done this forever. In fact, way back in 2016, there was a piece written for, if you can believe it, the website Salon, an author by the name of Mary Frances Berry, who's a lefty, but did some research into, hey, what's the deal with voter fraud in America? This is before everybody went completely crazy. What's the deal with voter fraud in America? And wrote a big book on the subject, but there's a small excerpt from it. It's honestly, it's so corrupt, but it is also laugh out loud hilarious how corrupt these Democrats have been through many years in Chicago. The headline is Election Fraud Chicago Style. Illinois' decades-old notoriety for election corruption is legendary. Legendary. Lefty writer saying this. Quote, a Chicago Tribune investigation of massive fraud published in January of 1983 led Webb, who was the U.S. attorney at the time, to announce that his investigators would use a computer, which was at the time an innovative crime-fighting technology, to determine how many dead people were registered to vote or registered in more than one location throughout the city's 2,910 precincts. Overall, 10% of Chicago's 1 million votes for governor, mayor, city council, and other public officials were alleged to be fraudulent. 10% of 1 million votes. That would be 100,000 fraudulent votes in Chicago. The fraud we uncovered in these indictments is so great, the scheme so intense, that the exact number of votes stolen in the November elections is unknown. U.S. Attorney Webb announced at a press conference revealing the arrest of 10 officials on the city's west side. Electoral fraud Chicago style was highly coordinated among Democrats, with a few Republican facilitators thrown in as nonpartisan accessories. Webb's case focused on activities in the 17th precinct and the 27th ward, where votes were bought and sold for a cup of cocoa, $2, a glass of wine, or a cigarette. The ringleader was Democratic precinct Captain Raymond Hicks, who coordinated ballot box stuffing with the assistance of precinct election judges. At a meeting at the L&B chicken restaurant, Hicks told precinct officials that all the elderly and mentally disabled people in a residential care home were, quote, crazy. He said to simply, quote, punch 10 on the computerized absentee ballot for every resident, which were all votes for Democratic candidates. When Webb examined the voters' ballot signatures against other records, his team discovered one resident whose full name appeared signed on his application, even though he had no fingers or thumbs and can only write an X by holding a pen between the stumps of his hands. So they literally stole this guy's ballot. They filled it. They signed it as if he had fingers. He didn't. This guy only had stubs for arms, and he could only hold his pen and create an X. And they figured out, wait a second, I don't think this guy actually voted. They said elsewhere in the precinct, the standard operating procedure for stealing votes was similar. They said one man who pleaded guilty in exchange for testifying against others recounted visiting every hotel and flop house in the West Side ward to pay for votes and obtain lists of people who had died or moved and would not be voting. One hotel clerk demanded a case of wine, which he supplied in exchange for a list of residents. So there you go. So in other words, just Chicago's been like this for a long time. It's all over the place. Democrat-run cities and districts throughout the United States have an infamous history. Tammany Hall out of New York have an infamous history of rigging elections to their own ends and using the patronage system oftentimes to do it, where they get local officials to do the dirty deed in exchange for getting some plush job inside of the government after they take power again. That's how this works. You don't even need to convey it. Your future is dictated on whether or not Democrats win. So you'll hustle up some votes in whatever capacity you can. Sure enough, should Democrats win, you get the big job you were looking for. That's how it's always worked. And so now in Illinois, in Cook County, you have a judge who's come along and said Donald Trump will not be on the ballot. Will not be on the ballot. And of course, that a legal battle is now ensuing over this issue. But it's just the latest example of this, where Democrats are so openly meddling in our elections. I want to get back to that in a minute, but first, just on the breaking news of this hour, we do have both the former and the current president of the United States making separate visits to our southern border. Joe Biden is in Brownsville, Texas, where very few people cross on any given day. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is in Eagle Pass, specifically at Shelby Park, and that is where so many illegal immigrants have poured across. And in fact, Governor Greg Abbott has helped to slow down some of those crossings by actually constructing border barriers, which, of course, Donald Trump was elected in 2016 on the promise that he would get it done. Democrats got in his way at every turn throughout his first term as president. He'd like to come back and finish that job. But here's Donald Trump arriving at the border today.
Nice weather, beautiful day, but a very dangerous border. We're going to take care of it. Thank you.
Nice weather, beautiful day, dangerous border. We're going to take care of it. Thank you. Short, sweet, to the point. Right now, Alejandro Mayorkas and Joe Biden are meandering around Brownsville, Texas. They are meeting with some Border Patrol agents, but not with Brandon Judd of the Border Patrol Union. Brandon Judd, the president of that union, was on with us yesterday here on this program, and he was explaining that Joe Biden is a disaster and that Donald Trump is the way out of this mess. The Border Patrol Union also has been tweeting very feverishly this last 24 hours about how awful Joe Biden is for the country right now. And Brandon Judd says that border agents are furious about Joe Biden and his presidency and what he's done to America's borders.
What we expected.
This is him on Fox this morning.
The reason why Border Patrol agents are so upset about this visit is because he's not going to any location where he's going to be able to evaluate what he needs to do. What are the policies? What are the programs that need to go into place? And he's not going to be able to do that in Brownsville. If he would have went to San Diego, if he would have went to Tucson, if he would have come out here to Eagle Pass, if he would have went to the trouble locations, he would have been able to get a little bit more understanding and evaluate the situation to come up with it. He's not going to do that. He can't do that. He's repeatedly said that he doesn't have executive authority to control this, and if he turned around and he did something today, then everybody would recognize that the past 3 years are all on him.
Yeah, just more lies coming out of the Biden administration. The vice president of the Border Control Union is Art Del Cueto, and he was on with Fox in the last 24 hours as well.
President Trump is going down to the border because he wants to go down there. That's what it is. And President Biden is going down because he has to. You know, for the last 3 years, he's been saying that the border is secure, that there is no issues. Obviously, everyone in America knows that that is a complete lie. And from day one of this administration, the border has been in chaos just on his rhetoric. Then he got rid of policies and it made it worse. And right now he's going down, you know, pretty much it's the Hail Mary to save, the rest of the campaign.
Well, it's a spin operation because, look, Biden did this on purpose. Biden came into office on the promise that people could rush the border. He said it during the campaign. He started releasing everybody into the country. He got rid of Remain in Mexico. In fact, apparently in that meeting earlier this week with Speaker Mike Johnson, they had a one-on-one at one portion where the speaker was talking directly to Joe. And Mike Johnson has been telling the press that apparently Joe said that he can't restore Remain in Mexico because, quote, Mexico won't go for it. And Mike Johnson said to him, "You're the president of the United States. Force it. Make them. Make them." And Joe's like, "Well, Mexico won't go for it." What a loser. I mean, just so completely weak. And he sold us out. I mean, look, he got rid of it in the first place. They knew what was going to happen, and sure enough, it is. And now we have people like Laken Riley dead in our streets because of Joe's decisions. It's a complete disaster. On that front, there was a big gathering today, commemoration of life for Laken Riley. Beautiful scenes out of Georgia, sad, tragic scenes. But the community gathering together, thousands assembling to support her. Meanwhile, Coringe was on with CNN this morning, was asked about Laken Riley's death by John Berman, and she had this word salad by way of an answer.
One of the things that some Americans are focused on are crimes that are allegedly being committed by migrants who are in the country illegally. There was the death of Laken Riley in Georgia. There's been an arrest made there. Republicans are directly blaming President Biden for this. Republican Senator Josh Hawley said, quote, "These deaths are on him." What's the White House response to that?
So first of all, I want to offer our condolences to the family of Laken. I mean, this is a horrific loss for any family, and obviously, if whoever is found guilty, we need to make sure that that happens. And obviously, we don't want to see anything happen like that again.
Wait, what? Whoever's found guilty, we need to make sure that happens? What is that sentence? Whoever's found guilty, we need to make sure that happens.
But here's the thing. We have done the work to make sure we're dealing with a broken immigration system. The Republicans have gotten in the way.
Are you tired of being insulted? Are you tired of this? We have done the work of dealing with a broken immigration. You broke the immigration system. You broke our sovereignty. You broke our borders. You battered them open. You've ordered Border Patrol agents to cut down the concertina wire to allow more people in. You tried to pull a fast one and pass this stupid amnesty legislation out of the Senate and then subsequently out of the House. You wanted to get it signed by the president and designed to normalize all of this chaos in the country, unfortunately. And in case you're thinking to yourself, well, didn't the Border Patrol Union endorse that? Yes, you're right, they did. In fact, I asked Brandon Judd about that yesterday. I wondered if he regrets endorsing that package, given all the details that came out. He said no. He said that there was elements of it that would have been better for the Border Patrol to get some control over this. But he said there were a lot of problems with it. He also said to us here that that bill needed to be amended. He only wanted the bill to begin going through the process so that it could be amended. Now, if that bill had actually gotten out of the Senate, I mean, the last thing Democrats would want to do is, quote, amend it. They were not interested in that game. So I think it was a bad idea for the Border Patrol to put its good reputation, the Border Patrol Union, to put its good reputation in line with that bill. I think that's a bad idea. But they did, and Brandon Judd stood by it. But look, you see what he's doing today. He's not standing by Biden. He's standing right there alongside Donald Trump. And saying he's the guy. He's the guy. If we're going to get control of this, it'll be with him, not with Biden.
So I was here almost a year ago doing the surge. It's a night and day difference right now. The president is here Why do you think the president is coming now, Susan?
Yeah, well, obviously he's a little too late, Lawrence. Thank you for having us on the show this morning. He should have been here last year, the same time you were here when there was a big surge and where we were having to, makeshift these processing centers. Right now, as you see, it is night and day. It has slowed down thanks to the governor and his interventions here. I think President Biden sees that there's a shift in Cameron County and the Valley when it comes to border issues, and that the conservative vote is high, and so he knows he needs to make a stop here. So
yeah, that's Brownsville resident this morning with Lawrence Jones over on the Fox News Channel talking about all of this. And Joe Biden at this moment is shuffling very slowly across the gravel there in Brownsville, Texas. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is getting a very detailed briefing, photos, all sorts of written information on what's happening in Eagle Pass, specifically at Shelby Park. In fact, let's take a listen in right now. Hard to hear. Yeah, difficult audio here. But regardless, that's the live feed. That's Donald Trump is, he's walking around. He's meeting with people, shaking hands, getting an up-close and personal look at all of the efforts that Texas law enforcement has undertaken to try and get control of the border down there. In the face of not only the cartels attacking it from the south, but the Biden administration attacking it from the north. That they've been running a pinch maneuver on the border barriers that Texas is trying to put up between both, the cartels and the Biden administration. And here's Joe Biden looking to pass the buck on all of this and say that it's someone else's fault. It's all Trump's fault. It's all Trump's fault that this is happening. Alejandro Mayorkas spoke to the press earlier on Air Force One. He's one of the people helping Joe Biden walk. He's standing out there next to him, trying to make sure he doesn't stumble. Here's the conversation with Mayorkas with one of the reporters today.
The head of the Border Patrol Union said that Brownsville is actually not a place where the president will be able to evaluate what's going on because there are relatively fewer crossings comparative to other sectors. So is the president going to be able to get a fulsome evaluation of what is actually needed right now
No,
when
he's
it comes
not.
to the border by going to Brownsville?
Yes, he will. I mean,
he lied.
Texas is seeing a reduction in encounters across the board over what we experienced in December and immediately before then.
Yeah, everything's going great, says Alejandro Mayorkas. Mayorkas, by the way, has been impeached for his failures as a DHS secretary, his sabotage of our country. We'll see if the Senate does anything with it. Doesn't look like they're moving very quickly. Coming up, Steve Baker is joining us just minutes away. He's being placed under arrest by Joe Biden's Justice Department tomorrow. What is he being charged with? He doesn't know yet. We'll find out what life is like for him right now, moments from now. Hey, good afternoon to you. 3:35 now. News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. Coming up in the next hour, Sean Davis will be here from the Federalist. We'll talk to him about the changing of the guard in the Senate. Is it truly changing? Mitch McConnell's given us his 8 months notice, but who's going to replace him? Sean's got the details ahead. And then Jason Sneed is here from the Honest Elections Project coming up at 5 as Kamala Harris, in a rare public appearance, announces that the Biden administration is using your money to pay college students to hustle up voters for Democrats. They're paying them. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. The FBI has never conducted a bigger investigation in its entire history than the one that they've been conducting into the events of January 6th of 2021. They have been bragging about all of the Americans that they've arrested and charged and locked up. And my next guest is, well, he's about to jump into a crazy situation tomorrow as he surrenders himself for arrest to this Biden administration. Steve Baker is an investigative reporter for The Blaze. He covered the events of January 6th and has been covering them ever since. And he joins us now. Hello, Steve. Good to have you back with us, sir.
Hey, Vince. Thanks for having me.
So my understanding is, as of earlier this week, you did not know what the charges against you are going to be. And at this hour, you still don't. Is that correct?
We still do not know. Both of my on-scene attorneys tomorrow will be given the charging document statement of facts as soon as I submit myself for arrest at 7 a.m. tomorrow morning here in Dallas.
Does that add up constitutionally? Aren't you entitled to know what you're accused of before you, quote, surrender yourself to arrest?
Well, this is an interesting situation, and technically, no. Technically, they don't have to unseal the charges until a defendant's arrest. In this case, they're not coming and swatting my home with 25 agents with the red dots pointed on my chest and at my family and my children. So they're not doing that. They're giving me the opportunity to come to them. So as soon as I submit myself to them and I'm served at that point with the arrest warrant, immediately the charges become unsealed, and my attorneys, I probably won't even know unless one of the agents volunteers and tells me what they are, because I won't be allowed to have any devices or any other type of writing utensils or anything else. So I may or may not know at that moment myself.
Okay. So tomorrow, you do know at least some of the contours of the charges. I understand that you've been told that they're only misdemeanors. Is that correct?
This time, yes. Now, back over 2 years ago, when they first threatened me with arrest and actually said that I was going to be charged within the week, that was in November of 21, some 10 months after January 6th. And so what happened at the time is they actually gave my attorney the statutes under which I'd be charged, and that included a felony charge, a rather ridiculous one. They were going to charge me with interstate racketeering. Now, I'll let that sink in for a second if you want to ponder that. Let me. But the racketeering charge, or interstate racketeering charge, was ostensibly based on the fact that I had licensed my work, my videos, like every other videographer and journalist, photojournalist does. And because I had licensed my work, and my work had been used by HBO, New York Times, and news agencies all over the world, and I had been remunerated for that work, they decided that I somehow must have known that there was going to be an unlawful event that day, and that I crossed state lines with the foreknowledge and planning and collusion with others in order to participate for my own personal profit.
Why would they even bother you? I guess I know the unfortunate answer to this question, but why would they bother charging you with anything in 2024, given that the record seems pretty crystal clear that you are a journalist who was performing your job as a journalist during the events of January 6th?
Well, that's a great question. The one thing that they're going to have to prove, and they're going to have to deal with this in the court of public opinion long before we go to trial, is the fact that this is a open and shut case of selective prosecution.
Yes.
Vince, there were over 60 journalists of all types, independent, credentialed, not credentialed, working for directly for as employees of news agencies, stringers, every type of journalist you can think of. Were represented out of those 60 individuals that went through broken windows and busted open doors and covered that event in the same manner, in the same behavior, the same professionalism in which I did.
Yes.
But they have only turned their sights on those who saw it differently than the approved narrative, or reported to right-wing agencies, or otherwise didn't as I said, primarily the narrative was the key factor, or whatever their background was. I mean, my goodness, J.D. Rivera out of Pensacola, he was a professional videographer who was contracted by a television station in Mobile, Alabama. And he got to D.C. and he did his job professionally, no chanting, no parading, whatever. But he had historically been working as an activist with the Latinos for Trump organization. So they accused him of being there for other than journalistic reasons, and they convicted him of the 4 basic misdemeanors after swatting him and his family, by the way. And then they convicted him of the 4 basic misdemeanors, sentenced him to 8 months in prison. He got 2 months of solitary confinement. And then they put him in a medium security prison where no other misdemeanor defenders or offenders were held.
So they subjected him to a political litmus test before they charged him.
Absolutely.
Now, to remind people, because it's been a while, Steve, since you and I spoke, just to be clear, during January 6th, did you break anything?
I did not break anything.
You didn't? Did you strike anyone? Did you fight with any law enforcement?
I fought with no law enforcement whatsoever.
Okay, so
I did not chant.
You
I
did not chant.
parade.
You didn't signal support for any particular political cause.
Afterward, I did some interviews. I did some interviews with mainstream media organizations, and I told them that I understood and supported the spirit of what was there in the protest that day. Certainly not the violence. And I was out there with WUSA with cameras on me, and I pointed at the dome of the Capitol building. I said, "There's a darkness under that dome."
Yeah.
And this is what these people are upset about. They've just been locked down for a year in their homes, not able to leave, not able to work. And I had about a 15-minute tirade on camera. I'll be interested to see how much of that they pull out and use.
Yes.
But my point being is that this was after I had exited the building. It was not how I behaved and how I conducted myself inside the building.
Sure, you weren't demonstrating inside the building is what I mean.
No, and I was wearing no political gear or attire or symbols. Quite frankly, Vince, I've never been a Trump supporter, and that's gonna be very interesting when they go pull out all my social media and try to show that I had a mindset as to be there as a supporter of Trump when they see the memes that I created against him.
Can I ask, are they making you into one?
Of course.
Yeah,
and I've been public about that. I mean, they are putting me in a position to where I'm going to have to choose between the guy who is locking me up, his administration, his Department of Justice,
yes,
and the guy who's saying I will pardon you.
Yep. Yeah, I can see how you would arrive at that conclusion.
Yeah.
Hey, so
is that illogical?
That makes a lot of sense to me. I'd do the same thing if I was in your position. So, one thing I do wonder, I do know some conservative journalists. I've worked with them who covered the events of January 6th. They had credentials to be inside the Capitol building. Perhaps that's the reason they haven't been hit with charges as of yet. Were you credentialed to be inside the building? Do you think that's the kind of technicality that they may be trying to exploit?
Well, see, this is where the law is very interesting. No credentialed journalist is allowed to cross a restricted barrier or a restricted police line.
Got it.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what your credential is. If you have a congressional gallery, Senate House gallery press pass, you do not have a legal right, local, state, federal, whatever, to cross a barrier without express permission from local law enforcement at that moment. Now, for generations and in most circumstances, law enforcement, again, local, state, federal, have always kind of looked the other way or even waved journalists in behind police lines or barricade lines,
right,
so that they could record and report what was going on in the public interest.
Yes.
But the second that a law enforcement officer says you have to leave now, it doesn't matter what your credential says. It doesn't matter if it's the New York Times, if it's Blaze Media, or if you're uncredentialed.
Got it. So what this leads to, as you point out, is a perfectly good case, a strong case of selective prosecution, because you've got any number of corporate news outlets who are really kind of the deciding factor in this cartel of journalism. Of like how they get treated. And so all the corporate news outlets, they're basically fine. And there will be some conservative news outlets as a result of their connection just to the congressional press operation that maybe, if we go after them, then that's going to subject CNN reporters to problems too. So leave them alone. But Steve Baker, let's take him out. And boy, it does look like selective prosecution based on everything you just laid out, Steve.
I think that's what it is, Vince. And I will tell you the truth here. The fifth person in through that broken window on the northwest side of the Capitol, what they call the Senate wing door,
right,
the window that was the first one busted out, the initial breach. The fifth person through that broken window was a New York Times reporter. He broke the law. He entered a restricted space
in a very unusual way. It wasn't just walking through a door; you just climbed through a window.
A highly provocative manner in which he did that.
Yeah.
Now, he's not been charged, as well as other individuals from other mainstream. There was about 60, as I said before, about 60 journalists who passed through those doors and windows. Now, there was a whole cadre of journalists, left wing, right wing, Fox News, whoever, that were inside the building already, covering the election certification. Now, that's a whole different group of reporters and journalists and photogs that were already in the building. They were in there with the permission of Congress. Anybody else who crossed over those first barricades with Ray Epps broke the law, technically.
A New York Times reporter climbed through a window into the Capitol. If I recall correctly, Ashley Babbitt was executed for that very thing.
That's correct. In fact, minutes after that, Luke Mogelson from the New Yorker, who captured the QAnon shaman praying and chanting in the Senate chamber, he passed through the same broken window just moments after the New York Times reporter did. He broke the law, but he's been celebrated, and he got his get-out-of-jail-free card when he submitted his written story to the New Yorker entitled "Among the Insurrectionists." His narrative was correct, and therefore he's not been charged.
Steve, what's the big picture here? What does this tell us about the state of our country right now and our justice system, sir, in your view?
Well, I mean, it's becoming cliche, but it's still true. We have a two-tier justice system right now. It's highly politicized, and we are looking at selective and political prosecutions and persecutions right now. And in fact, how all of the January 6 defendants have been handled by way of comparison. You can compare them to the 2020 rioters. You can compare them to the immigrants crossing the border and committing all manner of crimes across our country in, en masse right now. We can make these comparisons all day. So many of these other far, far more violent perpetrators of crimes, local, state, and federal, are being treated with kid gloves, catch and release, charges dropped, sent back out to commit crimes and crimes and crimes over and over and over again in multiple states until they kill someone in Georgia. But the January 6th grandmother takes a couple of selfies inside the Capitol Rotunda and then exits 10 minutes later. Their lives are destroyed.
Steve, I don't know if I've asked you before. Do you have a family, Steve?
Well, I'm at an interesting situation. My children are grown. My children are proud of me. They're living their own good lives now, and they are in a good way with me. We all spent about an hour on the phone together last night on a conference call, just the three of us. I'm not married, and yet these two human beings on the planet are the only two whose opinions I care about. And they love me, and they're proud of me, and they're supporting me. And so as a result of that, I'm ready to fight.
Tomorrow, when you turn yourself in for arrest, at this moment, you expect misdemeanor charges. Do you expect that you will be detained beyond that arraignment tomorrow?
We have been assured on multiple occasions to multiple of my attorneys, directly from the assistant U.S. attorney handling my case, that there will be no request from the magistrate to issue a detention of any kind. I am supposed to be arraigned in the morning, and I'm supposed to be released. The only thing that is, upsetting to me, it's laughable, but it wasn't necessarily unexpected, is they have informed me that I need to show up at the FBI field office wearing, and I quote, shorts, a T-shirt, and flip-flops. Now, you have any idea why that is?
An easy transition into prison clothes? Is that what that means?
That's correct. That's correct. Easy transition into the orange jumpsuit and leg chains. Just as they did independent journalist Stephen Horn from Raleigh, North Carolina. They marched him in front of the magistrate there in Raleigh, North Carolina, in leg chains and an orange jumpsuit for 4 misdemeanor charges. No violence, no parading, no picketing.
It's all tyranny theater.
Same thing to him.
Yeah. No, yeah. It's out of control. Steve, Godspeed. I'm saying a prayer for you tonight, and I'm so grateful that you came on to explain all of this. Please keep your head up, and we are so grateful. I look forward to talking to you again in the future, sir. Loyd Austin testifying before Congress today, and they had to limit his testimony because he's still too sick to answer questions.
Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here today. Let me start by saying that we all here wish you a full and speedy recovery. We understand you are still recovering, and sitting for too long is not the best thing for your health. So in consultation with the ranking member, we've agreed to your request to limit your appearance today to 2 hours.
Oh, what a joke. The guy's the Secretary of Defense. Just replace him already. This is another insult to the American people. Congressman Jim Banks had some questions.
Is it typical that the president would go 3 days without talking to his Secretary of Defense? Is that typical, or is that a regular posture? Do you usually go days without talking to the commander?
I mean, that can happen. It depends on whether or not the president's on travel. If I'm on travel, there are times when we do go days without direct communication.
So the big issue for me here is either the president is that aloof or you are irrelevant. Which one is it, Mr. Secretary? That you would go that the president would go 3 days without knowing that his Secretary of Defense is not on the job.
Literally in the hospital.
Neither. The president is not aloof, and I am. I participate in all of the.
Let me ask you this: on January.
Well said. Very well said. That cleared things up. Thank you, Loyd Austin. Can anyone in this administration speak? Let's just start there. Forget solving problems. How about delivering sentences? It's 3:58.